Hello everyone. Welcome to today's session in our summer internship program. My name is Mayar Tara, a senior gas and petrochemicals engineering student, and I'll be your moderator for today. On behalf of PioPetro, Arab Oil and Gas Academy, SPE Egypt section, and Millet Hub, I'd like to welcome you all in our I would like to extend a warm welcome to you all. Before we begin, a quick note. Please keep the chat box professional and ethical, and we encourage active participation, so don't forget to drop your question in the Q&A section below. So without further ado, let us welcome Dr. Ahmed Algarhy, who will give us a session on the introduction to fracturing to hydraulic fracturing. Dr. Ahmed Algarhy is a distinguished professional with over 15 years of experience in the energy and petroleum industry. Specializing in production enhancement services, Dr. Ahmed's expertise includes acidizing, hydraulic fracturing, geomechanics, geothermal energy, carbon capture, utilization and storage, and hydrogen technologies. He has successfully led projects for major companies like Apache, Chevron, BP, Shell, and Total. Currently a research manager at Millet Research Hub, Dr. Ahmed has a proven track record in publishing research on machine learning application in energy. His academic tenure as an assistant professor at Marita College underscore his deep knowledge in production enhancement, petrophysics, and well logging analysis. Dr. Ahmed holds a PhD and master's in petroleum engineering from Texas Tech University, has published over 30 research papers, and received the Distinguished Achievement Award for SPE International 2021. Now, let's extend a warm welcome to Dr. Ahmed Algarhy. Thank you so much for coming today, and the mic is yours.
Thank you, Maya, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Today, this is the first lecture about our course, Introduction to Hydraulic Fracturing. I got a question right now, someone asking about, is it a course and has a certificate, or is it a part of the summer training? The summer training will be a combination of multiple courses together. So we will have, let's say, 10 different courses, plus many one lectures, like an expert will show up just to give one lecture. Okay, like for example, tomorrow we will have Dr. Ahmed Farid, he will give just one lecture. Okay, but the rest of the professors or the rest of the experts will give a group of lectures, like what I'm doing right now. I will do 4 lectures about hydraulic fracturing, and this is lecture number 1. I hope this answers your question. So if we want to talk about hydraulic fracturing, at the beginning, we need to understand what is formation damage. So I will do my best today to explain to you what is formation damage. Let's begin. So we will talk about what is formation damage. We will talk about well stimulation. What is well stimulation? We will talk about hydraulic fracturing. Then why we do hydraulic fracturing. I will give you very shallow knowledge about each of these topics. In the coming lectures, we'll drill deeper and deeper. Okay, so before we talk about formation damage, we want everybody to understand what is porosity and what is permeability. I know that most of you are senior students, so for sure I'm expecting all of you understand the difference between porosity and permeability and know what is porosity and permeability, but let's review that before we start. Porosity is simply if you look to the mouse, and you see some spaces between the grains. So this brown things, this is the grain, this is the rock, the grains of the rock. Okay, maybe limestone, maybe dolomite, maybe sandstone, maybe shale, maybe something else. And this brown things, we call this as the grains. And between the grains, there are some spaces. These spaces, which is a light blue thing here, these spaces must have something in it. Maybe has water, maybe has oil, maybe has gas, but it cannot be vacuum. It cannot be nothing. It must have something, water or oil or gas or mixture between these three things, okay? If I get the volume of these spaces, if I get the volume of these spaces, these pools, and I will divide them by the total volume, I will call this is the porosity. So if I have 20% of the rock are spaces including water or oil or gas, it means the porosity is 20%. Sometimes we write it 20% or we write it 0.2. Okay? So this is a porosity. So what is the difference? What is a permeability? The permeability is a term describing how easy these these fluids can flow easily inside the rock. We agreed that we may have water or oil or gas. So these fluids, these three fluids, will stay in its place, or it can move from a place to another place. If it can move, it means there is some permeability. Okay, so the permeability it is a measure of a material's ability or the fluid ability to flow to flow from a place to another place. Okay, so if you look to the left, look to the picture, the bottom picture, look to the left, you see grains, but you don't see any spaces between them. It means there is what do you think? Is it a porosity here? Can you write me in the chat? For the left part, do you see any porosity? I will check the chat and see if you get it right or not. Perfect. There is no porosity. You see just grains, nothing between the grains. So it means there is no porosity. So the second question, do you see any permeability in the left side? Do you see any permeability? No. So this part is no porosity, no permeability. What about the part in the middle? You see some spaces, maybe has water or oil or gas in it, but there is no connections between pores. So pores are trapped, like you are in a room and windows are closed, doors are closed. So you will stay in that room. You cannot move, you cannot get outside that room, okay? It means there is no permeability. So the part in the middle, there is a porosity, but there is no permeability. Look to the right part, you see porosity and you see permeability. The fluid can move from a place to another place. Okay, so in oil and gas business, we need to have porosity. Why? Because porosity, this is the storage ability of the oil and gas. If we have 20% porosity, it means we have a lot of potential for oil or gas if we have oil and gas. I hope that we don't have water, because if we have water, it means that we are wasting our time. If we have a lot of water, I mean water instead of oil and gas, it means we are wasting our money and time. We are drilling to produce oil and gas, not to produce water. Okay? Look to the equation at the top. This is a basic form of Darcy equation. Darcy equation, you see here is Q. This is Q. This is the production rate or the injectivity rate. It can be injectivity or it can be production. And the negative sign, this is tell us if it is production or injection. And you see K here, this is the permeability. A, this is the contact area between the well and the reservoir. PB minus PA, this is the pressure difference, the delta P. And you see here at the bottom, you see mu, this is the viscosity of the fluid, and L, this is the length or the distance between point A and point B. This is a very basic form of Darcy law, And you know, Darcy developed this equation 18 something. You know, I will introduce Darcy equation later in this class, but what is important to tell you right now, if anything bad happened to the permeability, to that K, if anything negative effect, if that permeability went down, is it good for the production rate or not? Write in the chat. What do you think? If something harmful, something bad happened to the permeability, this is good for the production rate? No, you are right. You are right. You get it right. Thank you. Okay? It means anything bad will happen to the permeability. I will call this formation damage. Anything bad will happen to the permeability. I will call this formation damage. Okay? So formation damage is your enemy if you are working as a production engineer or reservoir engineer. Your enemy is formation damage. If you are a good engineer, you should avoid having any formation damage. Or if you get a formation damage, you need to think about how to fix it, how to remove it, or how to improve the productivity even more by doing stimulation. Stimulation here means doing hydraulic fracturing, or doing acidizing, or doing acid frac. Okay? Look to these two pictures at the top left. Do you see porosity in both of them? Yes or no? There is a porosity. Do you see a permeability in both of them? Do you see permeability? Yes. So in these two pictures, I can see porosity. Also, I can see permeability. Okay. So to summarize, what is formation damage? It is a damage happened to the permeability of the reservoir. The permeability was 10 millidarcy, and something bad happened, and that 10 millidarcy become 2 millidarcy. It decreased. So I can say, hey, I get a formation damage. Okay? Formation damage may happen because of the drilling fluids. The drilling fluids we are using during drilling the reservoir section. So the drilling fluid is the first source of damage happen to your reservoir by drilling fluids. So drilling engineers used to make a lot of formation damage to the reservoir. Later, the production engineers and reservoir engineers need to fix that by maybe using acids, doing hydraulic fracturing and things like that. Okay? So how to measure the formation damage? Think about this question. If we have a formation damage, how to measure it? How to give it a number? If I'm asking you, what is the distance between your home to the university you are studying at? You may tell me it is 10 miles or 1 mile or half mile, whatever the distance. So the miles here, or the kilometer or meters, this is a measure. This is a unit of a measure. Okay, so we need to invent a way to measure formation damage. So I can know that if the formation damage is too bad or little bad, or, you know, I need to know exactly how bad it is. Okay, so think about it, and I will answer this after a few minutes. Okay, so damage may happen during any time during the well life. The well life, it is the first day you drill the well, you drill your reservoir, until the last day you decide to plug this well and stop and leave it. Stop the production and plug it and leave it. So this is the life of the well. Day one, the birth until this. Okay, so you may get formation damage because of the drilling fluid. You may get some emulsions inside your reservoir. You may get some wettability change. You may get some invasion of the drilling fluids of the mud to the few inches inside the reservoir, and this will damage the reservoir. Anyone know what is wettability change? So your reservoir, you like to have a water wet reservoir or oil wet reservoir? What do you like? You like to have water wet reservoir or oil wet reservoir? Yeah, I see many of you get it right. Some get it wrong. We like to have water wet reservoir. Why water wet reservoir? Means the rock of the reservoir like to keep the water. The rock loves water, so it like to keep the water and hate and don't like the oil, so it will kick the oil out, so the oil will get produced. This is what we want. We want to produce oil. But the reservoir, because the reservoir will loves water, so the reservoir will like to keep the water inside it. It will not let it go. Okay, so we like to have water wet reservoir. What does that mean? If you inject any chemical and by mistake you change the wettability from water wet to oil wet, it means the reservoir will keep the oil and will kick out the water, so you start producing more water. This is bad. When you produce water, you need to pay money to treat this water and re-inject it again somewhere, or maybe transport it to somewhere else. So when you produce water, you are losing a lot of money. Okay. Also, damage may happen because of the cementing. Also because of the completion fluids. When you use water with KCl, for example, as a completion fluid, this KCl, these salts may invade the reservoir and damage the reservoir. When you do the perforation, when you perforate, sometimes you damage your reservoir because of the perforation. Okay. Any workover operation, let's say you have a sucker pump and the tube of the pump get parted or get a hole in it, and you want to change it. So you kill the well, then you remove the bad tube, then you replace it with a new one. The killing fluid you are using, most likely water and KCl, this may damage your reservoir. If you have gravel packing, during the production, during stimulation, during fluid injection. Also, in all of these things, you may damage your reservoir. So your job, similar to a physician or a doctor, and get a patient, and his job is to evaluate the patient and see what kind of disease he has. After he knows the disease, after you know exactly what kind of formation damage your well has or your reservoir has, you need to decide what should be the right treatment, what should be the right medicine you will give to your patient. Okay? Any deposition may happen inside your reservoir. Any deposition may happen in your reservoir. This is a formation damage. If you have paraffins, if you have asphaltene, if you have resin, if you have wax, any of these things, if it will precipitate inside your reservoir, for sure it will cause formation damage. Okay? The formation damage may happen at any formation. If you have carbonate reservoir or sandstone reservoir or shale reservoir, all of them, they get formation damage. Okay? How you will recognize you have a formation damage? You will notice there is a loss of well performance. That well was producing today 1,000 barrel per day, 1,000 barrel of oil, and tomorrow you find that 1,000 become 500. You lost 50% of your production for no reason, and this is not a natural decline. So what happened? Most likely, there's a formation damage happened. You need to decide what you did at that day. If there's any treatment, have you injected anything? Have you did any operation in your well? Because most likely you damaged your formation by mistake. Okay, so you will notice there's a loss in well performance. The well is not producing as usual, and the decline in production is not natural decline. Okay, so this deposition, this precipitate happen inside your reservoir, most likely it plug the pore throat. The pore throat, this is the connection between two pores. If you have two pores, the connection between them, the bottleneck between them, we call this pore throat. Okay, if any little particle move from a pore to a neighbor pore, it goes through this narrow bottleneck or narrow pore throat. It may stuck in the middle, so it will close the door. So all fluids behind it cannot move. You are plugging your formation, and this is for sure damaging your permeability. Change of waterability, we already discussed that. You may inject a chemical, and that chemical may change the waterability from water wet reservoir to oil wet, and you lose a lot of oil production because of that. It may happen anytime. Anytime. It is the same like a man or a woman. You can get sick when you are a kid, when you are a child. You can get sick when you are 20 years old. You can get sick when you are 40 years old. You can get sick when you are 70 years old. So formation damage may happen anytime during the well life. Okay? Also, that kind of disease or that formation damage, it can take various periods of time. Someone gets sick and get a medicine, and the second day he's good. Maybe someone gets sick and stay sick for 1 month or 6 months. So it is different. So the formation damage may stay short period of time or long period of time based on what is the type of that formation damage and how good is the engineers evaluating. Because if you evaluated the formation damage you have and you get it wrong, you did not get the right problem, you didn't know the right problem, for sure you will give a wrong medicine. So for sure your well will continue suffering and you continue losing production. Formation damage can be simple or complex. So you may have one type of formation damage, or you may have multiple types. You may get cold, so you have one disease. Someone may get 2 or 3 different diseases at the same time. He has diabetes, he has high blood pressure, he has something else. So you may have just one disease or multiple diseases at the same time. So the well may get a combination of formation damage, different sources of formation damage and different types of formation damage. Okay, it is always better to avoid. So when we are little kids and mom and dad advise us to stay healthy, don't do, let's say, don't walk under the rain and get your body wet because you will get sick or things like that. So you get some advices from mom or dad to avoid getting sick. This is exactly what we are trying to do as a petroleum engineers, is trying to avoid damaging the reservoir, because avoid damaging the reservoir is way better and easier. If you compare this with getting a formation damage and you stay a month or two or a year or two trying to fix a problem. So it is better to try to avoid it from the beginning. Try to think about any chemical you are injecting. You need to think about all the activities you are doing in your well. You need to talk to multiple experts about any operation you are doing. Okay, if we do this, we can avoid getting formation damage as possible. How to identify formation damage? If we have a formation damage in your well, how you will know that, oh, there is a formation damage? So I will notice loss of well performance. There is a decline in productivity, and this is not a natural decline. Number two, I can do something called PLT, production log test, or production logging tool, sorry, not test, tool, production logging tool. So you may log production logging tool to your well and know exactly, oh, this group of perforations, now they are producing water instead of oil. And you need to think about, okay, why is this water getting produced from that zone? So it seems like the water level, the water level start to raise up. And you need to think about, oh, are you using a production rate higher than the optimum? So are you, let's say, producing higher than the optimum rate? So you get some kind of water coning, for example. So there's a lot of ideas I may get out of running PLT, production logging tool. Okay, I can get a sample, or I can send a downhole video camera and see exactly what is going on near the perforation. So the treatments we are using, the medicine we use, I may use something to fix corrosion problem. Okay, I can use something to avoid sludging. Sludging, when you are injecting, let's say, a fluid, let's say you want to inject an acid treatment, and you add something for sludging. Sludging makes the acid look smudgy. You see a lot of suspensions in the fluid you are injecting. We call this sludging. Okay, sludging may cause formation damage. Okay, also I can use something to avoid emulsions inside the formation. Okay, also I can use something, let's say, for clay stabilizers, as a clay stabilizers. Okay, also I can use something to keep the interfacial tension, or to change it to something, to a value I like. Okay, so I can add any chemical to change, let's say, to avoid getting corrosion, avoid sludging, avoid emulsion, avoid any organic or inorganic precipitate, what we call scaling. Okay, use something for scale for clay stabilization, use something to keep the interfacial tension, and so on. Remember, getting rid of the formation damage is an integration of integrated effort. So you as a production engineer and the reservoir engineer, you work all together as a team. You see this orchestra in front of you? All these musicians, they work together in harmony to do the job right. Okay, so I cannot let the production engineer decide to do something and the reservoir engineer don't see a value for this, or believe this will make more damage and you start like proposing things not matching together. We need to think as a team, production engineering and reservoir engineering, and anyone expert in this, in evaluating formation damage, so we can decide what should be the right treatment. Okay, before we do the treatment, I can get some samples from the drill cuttings of that reservoir, or if I have some cores. If I decide I will use a chemical, I will use, let's say, acid treatment or whatever the chemical I will be using. And in the lab, I will do some testing and experiments to confirm that I will use the right formation damage treatment. It is better to do that. Before going and inject this treatment in your well, it is better to do some tests in the lab. If you are working with a service company like Baker or Halliburton or SLB, for sure they have these labs and they will try these things before go and inject the treatment to the well. Okay, back to how to measure formation damage. To measure formation damage, we invented something called a skin factor. And there is a famous equation we are using called Hawken formation damage. Hawken formula. Hawken's equation. This is the equation at the bottom. S equal K over Ks minus 1. And here is ln of S over Rw. Okay, so this is one of the techniques, one of the equations we use. This is the most famous one to evaluate the skin. Let me try to go back. Okay. So if you have a positive skin, positive S, right, means a chat. Is it something good or bad? Positive S. If you have positive S, this is something bad. Positive value for skin, it means you have a formation damage. Can we have positive 10? Yes. Can we have positive 20? Yes. Can we have positive 50? Yes. Can we have positive 100? Yes. Can we have positive more than 100? Yes. Okay. What about zero scan? Zero scan, or when S equals 0, it means no damage, no stimulation. We did not touch the reservoir. We did not make any damage to the reservoir. So zero scan means no damage, no stimulation. Okay, I see one of you saying it is hard to have it 0. Now we are talking theoretical. If you have it 0, means no damage, no stimulation. I see your point, because whenever you drill the well, for sure there's some drilling fluids will invade your reservoir and will cause some damage. Okay. What about having negative skin? If you have negative value for skin, what does that mean? If you have negative skin, it means you did stimulation process. You did hydraulic fracturing, you did acidizing, you did acid frac. So well stimulation, some students get confused between simulation and stimulation. Simulation, this is something totally different. Simulation, we get the reservoir simulation, for example, how to simulate a reservoir. For example, this is a different story and different topic. But well stimulation means how to make the production better. You are producing 1,000 and you want to make it 1,500. You want to get 50% more production. If you can do this, it means you did the stimulation. Okay, so how can we get negative 1 after hydraulic fracturing or acidizing? Yes or no? Can I get negative 1? Write me in the chat, yes or no? Can we get negative 4? Yes or no? Can I get negative 4? Yes, possible. Can I get negative 10? Can we get negative 10? It is impossible after doing hydraulic fracturing or acidizing or acid frac, it is impossible to get negative 10. You will never see this. Theoretically, you may see negative 7, but even negative 7, in real life, we don't see it. The minimum you can get, practically, if you work in the field for a company, is negative 4. You will not get less than negative 4. I see one of you wrote negative 3.5. This is close to 4. So you will never get something less than negative minus 4. Okay, so I will not go below minus 4, but for the positive value, I can get even higher than positive 100. One of you asking why? Why? The answer is this is the best practice we have. We have seen, we noticed hundreds of thousands of wells. We did hundreds of thousands of hydraulic fracturing jobs all over the world. I mean, all companies, all service companies. They did hundreds of thousands of hydraulic fracturing jobs, acid jobs, acid frac jobs, and we never see something below minus 4. It is something related to the physics of the reservoir, a nature of a reservoir. Okay, but if you are studying from a book, let's say the book by Michael Economides, the famous production systems book that most of universities are using, you may find a problem, and when you do the calculations, theoretically you get minus 7. But if you work for a company, you work for Apache or BP or Chevron, you will never see minus 7 in real life. It is just in books. Okay, you will not see anything below minus 4. Okay. The difference between stimulation and damage well and formation damage, when we have a well has formation damage, a well with a formation damage is like this sick boy. This boy has a fever, he's sick, he's tired. This is like a reservoir has a formation damage. And this strong man, he is stronger than normal. It means the well is producing more than normal. This is stimulated well. Anyone know who's this guy? Okay, I see some people. This is Big Ramy. He is Mr. Olympia 3 years ago. He was Mr. Olympia 3 years ago. He is very famous in the Middle East. Okay. So different scientists produced or developed different models to to have a mathematical model for formation damage. And the most famous one is this one. We call it Hawkins equation. This is the equation we have at the bottom here. S, this is a scan. It may be 0, it may be negative, it may be positive. And K, this is the permeability. of the reservoir, Ks, this is the permeability of the damaged zone, and Rs, this is the radius of the damaged zone, and Rw, this is the radius of the well. Types of formation damage, we already talked about that, but we can categorize the types of formation damage under two categories. We may categorize some of them under mechanical factors. Any solid invasion or any solid precipitate may happen inside your reservoir. I will call this mechanical. Any chemical reaction, like a precipitate, happen because a chemical reaction between a fluid you injected with a fluid inside your reservoir or with the rock itself. Any precipitate happen because of a chemical reaction, I will call this chemical factor. Sometimes we have something called SRB, sulfur-reducing bacteria. We have a special type of bacteria, especially when we have injectors. When we inject water, we get some bacteria downhole. We call it SRB, sulfur-reducing bacteria. So the SRB also considered one of the formation damage sources. I may inject a chemical with a special types of clays. Some little particles will liberate and start to move inside the reservoir. We call this fines migration. We call this fines migration. Many of you may get confused between the difference between fines migration and sand production. Guys, the difference is very simple. Sand production, when any particle from the rock of the reservoir get produced inside the well bore, and get produced to the surface, we call this sand production. If this little particle moved from somewhere inside the reservoir to another place inside the reservoir, but is still inside the reservoir, the movement happened inside the reservoir, we call this fines migration. When these little particles move from a place to another place inside the reservoir, it may get to a pore throat and get stuck and plug it. So it will damage a little bit the permeability. Because this is the difference between sand production and fines migration. So fines migration, the little particles move inside the reservoir, but not get produced. If it get produced, I will call it sand production. Now let's talk about what is well stimulation. Well stimulation is a technique I will do to make the productivity better. Okay, so any well intervention job you will do to increase the productivity. Simply, when we say well stimulation, I'm talking about one of three things. Maybe hydraulic fracturing, maybe matrix acidizing, maybe acid frac. Matrix acidizing means I will inject acid like HCl without breaking down the formation, without parting the formation, like in hydraulic fracturing. Acid frac, I will frac the formation using acid fluid, like HCl, for example. Okay, so hydraulic fracturing, acidizing, and acid frac, this is exactly what we call well stimulation. Let's talk a little bit about hydraulic fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing, I will use engineered frac fluid. Engineered fluid means a fluid with a recipe. A fluid has ingredients. When one of you go to the kitchen, decide to make some a delicious food, you want to cook something, you get ingredients. You will add these things together in special portions and until you cook the food. If you get it delicious and everybody like it, it means you get it perfect. You did it right. Okay. So I will get a frac fluid, which is a lot of chemicals. We add them together with fresh water. We mix them together. Then we inject them in a high rate to the formation. And the downhole pressure will be higher than the resistance of the formation. So I will break it. You hit the reservoir until you break it into two pieces. You open a fraction. If the reservoir has a breakdown pressure of 6,000 psi, and you inject a fluid in a high rate, let's say 20 barrel per minute, 25 barrel per minute, 30 barrel per minute. This is a high rate. In shale wells, sometimes we inject 60 barrel per minute when we inject slick water. Sometimes we inject 80 barrel per minute. Sometimes we inject 100 barrel per minute. Okay, but in the Middle East, most likely we will not exceed 35 barrel per minute for some reasons. I can explain if any of you want to know more about that. You can ask me in the after we finish in the question Q&A part. Okay. So I will inject that fluid, that engineered fluid, in a rate higher than in a rate that build the pressure higher than the breakdown pressure of the formation. So I will break it. After you stop injection, the formation will close again. So I need to inject something with a frac fluid, what we call it propellant, little balls, we call it propellant, to stay inside the fracture to keep the fracture open. And we will see these things later. So look to the picture, to the right part of the picture. This is a vertical well, and I have perforations here, and I will inject the fluid, and this fluid will be in a high rate. It will break down the formation. It will crack it. Like there's a glass of, there's a window and it has a glass, and you hit the glass with something, so you crack it. You make it, you crack it in all directions. This is the hydraulic fraction. It is a way to break down the formation, and you inject the propellant later to keep these fractures open, so the reservoir will produce more and more and more than normal. You can try hydraulic fracturing whenever you have low permeability reservoir. What about if you have high permeability reservoir? Write me in the chat. If you have high permeability reservoir, you do hydraulic frac or not? When you have high permeability reservoir, like in sandstone, very excellent sandstone, is it a reason to do hydraulic fracturing? Okay, most of you said no, but actually the answer is yes. In high permeable formation, I may do hydraulic fracturing for sand control. It is different reason. There's something called frac and pack. You know the wells in the Mediterranean, in Egypt, in the Mediterranean, for example, in Cyprus or in Egypt, or if we have wells, let's say in Algeria in the sea, or wells in the Mediterranean in north of Libya, for example, or some wells in the Arabian Gulf, or some wells in the Gulf of Mexico. These wells produce a lot of sand. So I may need to do hydraulic frac for sand control, not to increase production, because the production already great and I like the production. I do this only to stop producing sand from the formation. So one of you said, oh, so it is not hydraulic, it is hydraulic frac, because I already fracked the formation, but it is a hydraulic frac not to increase production. It is a hydraulic frac for a different reason. We call it frac and pack for sand control. You are trying to make a screen inside the formation to stop sand production. We have different type of hydraulic fractures, and I will show you later these a list for these different types. Look to the second picture here. This horizontal well. Imagine the lateral of the horizontal section is 5,000 feet or 10,000 feet. There's no way to frac this the 5,000 feet in one stage. We cannot do that. Operation-wise, we cannot do it. So I will divide this horizontal section, maybe 300 feet. Then I will frac the first 300 feet near the toe. Then I will set a plug, then frac the next 300 feet. Then I will set a second plug. Then I will frac the third 300 feet and keep doing this until I finish. After you finish, you drill these plugs and open your well for production. We call this multi-stage fracturing. This is very common with shale. If you have carbonate formation, you may do this using a coiled tube, what we call it acid frac. Okay? So please watch this video. Watch carefully this video.
There are many formations with multi-zone oil and gas reservoirs that are vertically drilled.
The good thing about this video is summarizing exactly what we are doing. Summarizing when we drill, when we have a mud logger, when we have, set the casing and cement. So it is better to watch it. I will send you the link whenever we post a video on YouTube. I will send you the link for this video in the description part. So when you frac, look to this picture. When you frac, so the x-axis here is a time, most likely by minutes. Okay, and the y-axis here is the bottom hole pressure. This is PSI, pound per square inch. Okay, and when you start injecting, the pressure keep increasing, then start to make a little bend until this point, then you break down the pressure. So the pressure, the frac start at this point. Look to the mouse. The fracture starts at this point. Look, you are injecting, look to this blue, dark blue. So the injection rate, I will try to keep the rate constant. I will try to keep the rate constant until a point we stop the injection. Okay, see? The injection process is stopped here. So the fracture between this point until this line. Okay, so this point we call ISIP, instantaneous shut-in pressure. Why we get it here? So one more time, I have the time on the x-axis by minutes. I have the pressure, the bottom hole pressure in the y-axis by PSI. Then when you start injecting, the pressure will keep raising up until this point. Then the fracture will start. The hydraulic fracture will start here. You see the injection, the blue line, the blue injection line here, the injection rate. I will do my best to keep it constant. If you want to know why we keep the rate constant, please ask me after we finish. Okay? At this point, we have something called ISIP. ISIP is instantaneous shut-in pressure. Why it is not exactly at this point when we stopped the injection? Because I need to calculate for the friction inside the system. we have 3 different types of friction. I have friction inside the tubing, friction inside the perforation, friction inside the formation itself. We call it tortuosity friction. Okay, so I will use the ISIP point here to calculate this part to get some idea about the friction inside the system. Okay, at this point, the fracture already closed. We call this fracture closure pressure. Okay, after this point, the fracture is closing, so I can do normal well testing. So you see the linear flow, the radial flow, the same like the normal well testing we may do. Okay. The different applications for hydraulic fraction. I may use hydraulic fraction to improve production. Okay. I may use hydraulic fraction for sand control, what we call it frac and pack. By the way, the frac and pack, we call it short and fat fraction. So we create a short and fat fraction. Fat means the width, the fracture width is a little bit bigger. Okay, and we start packing a lot of propellant to make this fracture wider and bigger. Okay. Sometimes when we have injectors for water flooding project, because when you do water flooding, you keep cooling down the formation, the hot formation. So maybe after 1 year or 2, the formation will get fractured by mistake. Not by mistake, we call it unintentionally. It will get fractured because when you cool it down, the stresses keep decrease the minimum horizontal stress value keep decreasing until the well get fractured. We call it unintentional. Okay, the last application, sometimes we use hydraulic fracturing for disposal. If you want to inject drill cuttings, for example, there's companies specialize in injecting drill cuttings. They get the drill cuttings, they dry it, they mill it, they make it like a powder, mix it with water. Then they start injecting the drill cuttings in isolated zones underground. So this is also a good application for hydraulic fracturing. Okay. So why we do hydraulic fracturing? Why we do hydraulic fracturing? I want to ask this question to Mr. Henry Darcy. He passed away 1856. Henry Darcy is a French civil engineer. Long time ago, he was designing or planning to make a fountain in a place near Paris. And he made an equipment, and he was making experiments on water and something like a soil. Okay, so he invented this equation. And because this equation very valuable for petroleum engineers, so we adopted this equation, and I can say it is the most famous equation we are using as a petroleum engineers. For sure, we have different forms of Darcy equation. This is a very basic one. This is, because he was doing experiment in a lab. Okay, so we have different forms of Darcy law or Darcy equation, but this is a very basic one. This is the production rate or the injection rate. This is the permeability. This is the area of the tube. This is the pressure difference between point A and point B. This is the viscosity. This is the length of the tube. Okay. So if you increase the contact area here, what will happen to the production rate? You will produce more or less if you increase A. What means the chat? If you increase A, you will produce more. Make sense? It means anything you will do, any technique you will do to increase the contact area between your well and your reservoir, this will get you more production. Actually, what is hydraulic fracturing do is increasing the contact area between the well and the reservoir. I will show you how. Look. This is a vertical well. Look to the contact between this vertical well and the reservoir. Very little area. Look to this well. This is horizontal well. This horizontal section maybe 5,000 feet, maybe 7,000 feet, maybe 10,000 feet. So now we have more contact area between the well and the reservoir. So my horizontal wells will produce more than a vertical well. Why? Because we have more contact between the wellbore and the reservoir. When you do hydraulic fracturing or multi-stage fracturing, you are increasing that contact area. So simply, if anyone asks you why hydraulic fracturing produce more, you can say because hydraulic fracturing increase the contact area between the well and the reservoir. The hydraulic fracturing can bypass the formation damage. The hydraulic fracturing will make a new highway or a new path for the fluids to go quickly from the deep inside the reservoir to the wellbore. So many reasons that makes hydraulic fracturing very good. There's something we call fracture conductivity. Fracture conductivity is the fracture width times the proppant permeability. The KF here, this is the proppant permeability. When you multiply the proppant permeability with the fracture width, I will call this fracture conductivity. Okay? Here is to summarize what is a formation damage. Again, here is a fracture. This red zone, this is the damaged zone. You see the fracture here is bypassing the damage. If you are from Cairo and you know that Ramses Square is very crowded during, let's say, the rush hour, for example, or any square in your city, very crowded at a specific time. And instead of going through that crowded square, you decided to take a highway. They make a highway for you at the top of that square. No light, no traffic. Just you go immediately in a high speed. Okay, this is the hydraulic fracturing. So the hydraulic fracturing, when you think about it, think about a highway. A highway, and you drive your car like 120 kilometers per hour. No one stop you, no traffic light, no cars. Except your car, you are driving alone, for example. This is like the hydraulic fracture. Okay? To summarize, your job as a petroleum engineer, you work like a doctor. Your job is to, whenever you have a well not producing as normal, a sick one, you will consider that well or that reservoir the same like a patient, someone sick. And the formation damage is like the disease. And your job is to identify, as a doctor or as a petroleum engineer, is to define or to know exactly what is the name of the disease. Okay? You do something called symptoms and diagnosis. This is like when you go and see a doctor and he asks you to do some blood test, do some scan, chest scan, or whatever the doctor will ask you to do. We call this diagnosis technique. And the symptoms, when you have a decline in production, this is one of the symptoms, for example. Okay? At the end, after you do the right evaluation, you decide what should be the right medicine you will get. Okay? I will stop here and I will give you like a 10 minutes to take some questions. Okay, so there's a question, someone asking when we do hydraulic fracturing. When we do hydraulic fracturing. So hydraulic fracturing is a way to improve productivity and a way to fix the formation damage. I will not treat the damage, but I will try to add some enhancement, production enhancement to the system. So let's say you have a formation damage and that formation damage made some decline for production. But when you do hydraulic fracturing, you increase the productivity by double, for example. So you still have the damage, but you will not see it. You will see only the enhancement in production, because the formation, the hydraulic fracturing has dominant impact, or has more impact. Okay, you can do it whenever you decide to increase production. If you have a good candidate for hydraulic fracturing, if you have a sandstone formation, for example, and you decide to increase productivity, you can do some design and see how much you will get increase and production increase. And if you like that, you can order the service and pay for the service company and do it. If you are producing shale, organic shale, like here in the United States or in China or Argentina, for example, there is no way to develop shale without hydraulic fracturing. So hydraulic fracturing is part of developing shale. Okay, I will take a second question. How to identify a formation damage from a surface sample? When you get a surface sample, you send it to the lab. They analyze a sample in the lab, and they will know exactly what kind of, let's say they found some scale, for example. There's some carbonate deposition, let's say calcium carbonate. They know, okay, oh, it seems like there was some scale. Maybe they found some sulfide or some sulfate. So they do analysis to the samples they are getting in the lab, and they will tell you exactly the composition. And based on that composition, you will see if you have, let's say, a special type of scale, for example, or you have, let's say, a wax or asphaltene or anything like that. So you get a sample, send it to the lab, and they will send you a report about exactly what is in that sample. What could be the negative effects of hydraulic fracturing? Trust me, if you have a good candidate for hydraulic fracturing, you will not see a negative effect for the job. If you can make more money after you frack the wells, why not? If the oil in a good price or the gas in a good price, so fracking will be a good choice. If the oil price very low or gas price very low, maybe you will say, oh, this is not good time to frack the wells. There are some people claiming that, oh, when you frack a lot, you may trigger earthquakes or a fault. You may trigger a fault, but this is I don't trust in that. The hydraulic frac is something very little, and it is hard to imagine that 100 job of hydraulic fracturing in one location will make a fault, sliding, and earthquake happen. I doubt. I don't agree with that. How does a sand prevent it to enter the well? With the help of fracturing. So sand control, we have different ways for sand control. I may have put some gravels inside the well near the perforation, and these gravels will work as a screen. So it will let the oil and gas and water go through it and get produced, and the solids will stay outside. Okay, we call this gravel pack. Okay, if you want to make this screen inside the formation, you frag the formation, you inject a propellant, and you design and plan for early screen out, and you keep pushing more propellant, so you make a short and fat fracture. That short and fat fracture will work as a screen, but this time the screen will be inside the formation, inside the reservoir itself. So it will let the oil, gas, and water get produced, and it will stop any solids coming from the formation. This is exactly what we do with in frac and pack. Okay, what could be a reason for no production after a hydraulic frac? If you do a hydraulic frac and you get zero production, it means you did a very bad design. The guy who did that, he must get fired. When you have a well that will produce, let's say, 100 barrels per day, or 500 barrels per day, and you do a hydraulic frac job, and after the hydraulic frac job, you get zero production, it means that design was and the implementation was very stupid. These people, these engineers are not qualified. It is better to keep them home. Maybe they did not include the breaker with the frac fluid if they are doing conventional fracking. Maybe they added something has a lot of iron, a lot of things that may cause a formation damage. So you did a severe formation damage inside your formation. But anyway, if you do a hydraulic frac job and you get less production, you need to fire this team, because the design process takes long time. So if you do the design on software, and you do the simulations, and you select the chemicals, and you invite SLB or Baker or Halliburton or a different company to do the job, and all these people, all these experts don't notice there is something stupid going on and you are damaging your well, it means you don't have a good team. And I have never seen a company did a hydraulic frac job and get less production. It is hard to for something like this to happen, because most of the service companies, they have good training. Because if Schlumberger will do this mistake, or Halliburton, they will do this mistake, you will never get them again to do the job for you, right? By the way, here in the United States, the design of the frac done by the operator, not by the service company. The service company, they are just pumping the fluids you are asking them to do to pump. I will take the last question. Most likely, we decide for hydraulic fracturing right after drilling. Long time ago, like 30 years ago or 40 years ago, when you do hydraulic fracturing, most likely you keep the well producing for a period of time. And if you don't like the production, the production is decreasing, then you start discussing doing hydraulic frac. But these days in Middle East, for example, or even everywhere, when you drill the well, you frac it back to back. You don't wait. And when we do things like this, you may tell me, okay, maybe if you keep the well producing without frac, it will produce in a good shape. So why you frac it? We call this best practice. We add that $500,000 or $300,000 to or whatever the expenses of the hydraulic frac job to the cost of the well, and we frac it from day one. We perforate, we drill, we perforate, we frac, then we open for production. Okay, so thank you very much. I will see you again on Thursday. Thursday, we will have our second lecture. Please, if you have questions I did not answer today, please keep them to Thursday, and please write them in the Q&A on Thursday, and we will answer them. I will post this lecture on YouTube tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning, and you will find a post in your Google Classroom about this lecture on YouTube. Please watch it again 1 or 2 times because it will be a quiz about this lecture. I will post a quiz about this lecture. Thank you very much, and see you Thursday.